Welcome to the Elder Darkness. Tonight we journey to the end of an age and the end of a god's dominion. Morgoth, once named Melkor, is no ordinary villain. He is the prototype of evil, the first Dark Lord who shaped shadows and seeded despair. So tonight, as you lie back and drift, imagine this. A black sky not from nightfall, but from a god's burning wrath choking the stars. Imagine forests corrupted, mountains shattered, and seas boiling with rage. This is not a bedtime story for the faint of heart. For example, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in Thangorodrim without getting squashed by a passing troll, or worse, politely consumed by a winged beast that Morgoth casually invented during a mood swing. So before we start entering the world of Middle-earth, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you feel comfortable with this Middle-earth legend. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, so I can imagine you tucked in with a cup of tea while the world ends softly in your ears. Now, lie back and relax as we travel to the world of Middle-earth. Morgoth, the maker of monsters, a world shivers under his shadow as Melkor, the rebellious Vala, twists creation into nightmare and sets the stage for his ultimate fall. Long before hobbits even existed, before the Shire was a dream in a wizard's beard, there was Melkor, one of the mightiest of the Ainur, the divine beings who shaped the cosmos. He was ambitious, radiant, and dangerously curious. Unlike his brethren, Melkor didn't want to be a part of the song of creation. He wanted to solo, badly, and like most bad solos, his quickly went off-key. In the beginning, Melkor sought the flame imperishable, the divine spark of true creation. But Eru Iluvatar, the One, never gifted it to him. That rejection stung, and like a cosmic teenager denied a guitar solo at band practice, Melkor lashed out, distorting the music of the Ainur, injecting chaos where harmony had lived. Middle-earth historians still debate whether Melkor's fall was inevitable or chosen. Was he made to rebel, or did he simply want too much too fast? Either way, his descent transformed him into Morgoth, black foe of the world. When the Ainur descended into Arda, Melkor came too. At first, he acted like he belonged, fixing mountains, igniting stars, throwing parties in the sky. But quickly, he began to spoil. He froze the world's first lights. He defiled the waters. He hoarded the elements. And every time the Vala built, he broke it. All forged mountains, Morgoth cracked them with frost. Yavanna grew forests. Morgoth sent firestorms. Think of him as that one roommate who unplugs the fridge because he doesn't believe in cold food. Eventually, he raised a fortress in the north, Utumno. It was a pit so deep, even Echo feared falling in. Here, he began his dark experiments, twisting captured spirits, elves, beasts, orcs, Balrogs, and something else. Not all his creations had names. Some just lurked. Then came the lamps. Iluin and Ormel, massive towers of divine light set on opposite ends of Arda. Melkor toppled them in a tantrum so violent, it reshaped the continents. If you ever wondered why Middle-earth has weird coastlines and suspiciously named regions like the Waste of Run, blame Melkor and his aim with a cosmic sledgehammer. But light, as always, returned. The Vala retreated to Aman, their blessed realm in the west, and raised the two trees, Telperion and Laurelin. While Melkor plotted, they glowed, gentle beacons of hope far from his reach. Far but not forgotten. Melkor, now seething in his fortress of Angband, a backup stronghold he built in case Utumno ever got, say, demolished in a divine war, waited. Over centuries, he sowed dread and misinformation, whispering into the dreams of men and creeping into elven tales like a mold in a sacred library. He saw beauty and wanted it caged, power and wanted it bent. Most tragically, he saw the Silmarils, crafted by Fëanor, the most gifted elf who ever lived, and probably also the most emotionally unstable. The Silmarils were gems that held the light of the two trees. Not metaphoric light, actual, preserved starlight from Arda's golden dawn. They glowed with a living brilliance, untouchable by evil. Morgoth wanted them, naturally, and when Morgoth wants something, the world trembles. He manipulated the greatest smith among the Vala, Allah's rebellious student, Sauron, who would one day play an encore. Then he corrupted elves, setting one against another. He even got himself pardoned by the Vala at one point, faking a redemption arc so convincing that some elves probably considered making him a Tumblr fan page. Once free in Aman, he struck. The trees were slain by Ungoliant, a spider-like monstrosity Morgoth had recruited in exchange for light. Yes, this is a universe where giant spiders crave the taste of divine photons. The Silmarils were stolen. The world darkened. Feanor's fury ignited the first kinslaying, and the elves marched in vengeance, leaving Aman behind to reclaim the jewels. Thus began the long, bitter First Age. Back in Middle-earth, Morgoth crowned himself in Angband with the Silmarils. Literally, he embedded them in an iron crown, burning his own flesh, but never letting go. Power always comes at a price, but Morgoth preferred scars to surrender. And so, while the elves crossed the grinding ice, while the sun and moon first rose to chase back his shadow, Morgoth built armies. Dragons slithered into existence. Trolls shambled from pits. Balrogs, flaming demons with whips, trained for war like it was open mic night in hell. By the time the Noldor arrived in Beleriand, he was ready. Or so he thought, because even the first Dark Lord couldn't quite predict how stubborn, how luminous, and how chaotic his enemies would become. War of the Jewels. Elves, men, and dwarves rise against Morgoth in the long and brutal First Age wars, centered around the Silmarils and a darkness deeper than death. The war that followed wasn't a single clash. It was a saga of betrayals, unlikely alliances, and so much generational trauma that even Galadriel might need a nap. The Elves, led by the fiercely proud Noldor, landed in Middle-earth burning with fury. Fëanor, the craftsman of the Silmarils, was first among them, determined to wrest back his gems from Morgoth. But, in true overconfident elf fashion, he charged straight at Angband without a proper battle plan or backup and got promptly ambushed by Balrogs. Fëanor died screaming curses at Morgoth, and with him went any chance of a clean victory. But his sons remained, and if you thought Fëanor was intense, his 7 offspring were like a family-sized pack of vengeance-fueled firecrackers. They swore the oath of Fëanor to retrieve the Silmarils at all costs. All costs, like even if it meant burning friendships, kingdoms, or their own dignity. The result? The War of the Jewels. 1,000 years of sieges, skirmishes, temporary peace treaties that lasted about as long as a hobbit's snack, and some of the most epic duels in elven history. There was Fingolfin, High King of the Noldor, who rode solo to Angband's gates and challenged Morgoth to single combat. Yes, that Morgoth, the literal dark god, and he actually wounded him, slashed him 7 times before being crushed by Grond, Morgoth's hammer the size of a mansion. Remember that next time you hesitate about sending an email. Morgoth limped for the rest of his immortal life. Middle-earth historians still debate whether the wounds weakened him spiritually or just gave him a dramatic gait. Either way, he stayed hidden for centuries afterward, letting his generals run the front lines. This era also gave us the tragic tale of Beren and Luthien. He, a mortal man. She, an elven princess with serious magical talent and no time for nonsense. Together, they broke into Angband, disguised as Morgoth's own soldiers, mind you, put a sleepy spell on the Dark Lord, and stole a Silmaril from his crown. From his crown. It's like sneaking into Mordor to prank Sauron by stealing his contact lens. This moment was so legendary that it became an actual myth within the myth. Even Aragorn tells the story to Arwen as a model of true love. Yes, that Aragorn, later king, formerly ranger, current heartthrob. But even victories carried a curse. The Silmaril burned Beren's hand, and eventually, the jewel ended up in the sea. 1 down, 2 to go. Dwarves entered the fray too, mostly reluctantly, driven by greed and grudges more than justice. At one point, they murdered Thingol, an elven king, for refusing to hand over a Silmaril they helped encase in a necklace. That triggered the second kinslaying and a war between elves and dwarves. Yes, a war. Over jewelry. Welcome to Middle-earth. Quirky tidbit. The dwarves had a secret name for Morgoth, Belagirth, which roughly means great death. They refused to speak it aloud. Instead, they used black foe or, sometimes, that fire-drenched nuisance upstairs. Probably, in time, a second Silmaril came into play, held by Dior, son of Búrin and Luthien. That made him a half-elf, half-man royal hybrid, sort of the genetic smoothie of Middle-earth. Unfortunately, the sons of Fëanor attacked his kingdom of Doriath, killed Dior, and lost the jewel again. Cue another family tragedy and another Silmaril disappearing into the wilderness. Eventually, all resistance against Morgoth started to falter. His enemies were brave, yes, but they weren't gods, and even the bravest heroes need rest. Enter Hurin and his children. Hurin, a human lord, was captured by Morgoth and forced to watch the doom of his kin unfold. His son Turin grew up cursed, slayer of dragons, friend of elves, and tragic figure straight out of Shakespeare with a sword the size of a canoe. His sister Nienor lost her memory and married Turin without knowing they were related. Classic Morgoth. He didn't just destroy armies, he unraveled people's minds. But even Morgoth had to admit, things were getting complicated. His own minions, like Sauron, were beginning to think long-term. Dragons, once reliable weapons, started questioning orders. And the elves, stubborn, luminous, slightly insane, just wouldn't quit. That's when the Vala finally said, enough. They'd stayed in Aman, believing the exile of the Noldor was punishment enough. But after the ruin of so many kingdoms, and perhaps after reading the latest Silmaril casualty report, they decided it was time to intervene. They summoned the might of the West, the Host of Valinor. Led by Eowyn, herald of the godlike Manwë. It was a host of angels, spirits, and warriors whose swords hadn't seen daylight in centuries. And Morgoth? Well, he did what any former cosmic being with a superiority complex and mounting PTSD would do. He panicked and started digging deeper into Angband, hoping no one would come knocking. Spoiler, they would. With fire. The Valas strike back, the Host of Valinor returns in force, unleashing the war of wrath with dragons, Balrogs, and one terrifying sky battle that Middle-earth still trembles over. The Host of Valinor did not arrive quietly. Their landing on the shores of Middle-earth marked the beginning of the most cataclysmic war the world had ever known, the War of Wrath. Elves of Aman, Mayor cloaked in divine radiance, and legions of warriors descended upon Beleriand like a tidal wave of light. Their banners gleamed under a sun long dimmed by centuries of grief. Even the sea seemed to hold its breath. Morgoth, still burrowed deep within the fortress of Angband, understood at last. This wasn't just another rebellion. This was judgment. The armies clashed in thunderous fields where once forests grew. Morgoth unleashed everything. Dragons erupted from deep caverns. Balrogs emerged, swinging flaming whips in arcs of destruction. And yet the Host of Valinor advanced, step by burning step. One of the most terrifying moments came when Encalagon the Black took flight. This was no ordinary dragon. Encalagon was the greatest of Morgoth's winged beasts. So large, it said his wings could blot out entire valleys. His roar cracked mountains. Middle-earth historians still debate whether he was created late in Morgoth's war plans, or whether Morgoth had been saving him like a final boss in a game he'd hoped never to play. But play it he did. Encalagon rose into the sky, setting fire to the very clouds. He was met by Erendil, the half-elven mariner, now sailing through the sky in a flying ship blessed by the Vala. Yes, Middle-earth has flying ships piloted by star-bearing heroes. Don't worry about the physics. The battle between Arendelle and Ancalagon took place above the clouds. A thunderous ballet of flame and light. Stars dimmed, seas boiled, and in the end, Ancalagon fell onto the peaks of Thangorodrim, Morgoth's mountainous stronghold. His corpse crushed them. The shockwave was felt for leagues. Even the dwarves of the Blue Mountains reportedly paused their mining and said, "What was that?" With his mightiest champion dead and his fortress cracked, Morgoth's defenses collapsed. The Vala's host broke through Angband. The tunnels of shadow that had once echoed with screams now rang with the clashing of divine steel. Balrogs were hunted, one by one. Some were destroyed, some fled. One, they say, dove so deep into the earth that it wouldn't emerge again until the Fellowship of the Ring disturbed its slumber beneath Moria. Remember that next time you're spelunking. Morgoth, for all his power, did not go out in fire and fury. He begged. He who had unmade stars and twisted spirits, now pleaded for mercy. He was bound in unbreakable chains, and Ainur, the same ones that had once held him before his false redemption. The Vala tore the Silmarils from his iron crown, and his blackened body was dragged from his throne. And what do you do with a fallen god? You don't jail him in a cell. You cast him into the void beyond time and space. Morgoth was exiled from the world. Not dead evil, in Tolkien's world, is rarely that tidy, but removed, cut off, a wound sealed, though never quite healed. The Silmarils did not return to peace either. One was cast into the sea, another buried in the earth, and the third taken to the sky by Arendelle, set forever in the stars. The oath of Fëanor became unfulfillable, and the last of his sons either perished or vanished. The War of Wrath had ended, but the price? Unthinkable. Much of Beleriand, the entire western region of Middle-earth where all this had unfolded, was gone. Sunk beneath the sea. Cities drowned. Mountains swallowed. The map changed. Quirky tidbit. Some surviving elves later joked that Morgoth's true defeat wasn't the Host of Valinor, but the collapse of his real estate investments. Amid the wreckage, the survivors staggered into a world reborn. Gil-galad rose as High King of the Elves in the west. Dwarves rebuilt their cities further inland. Men, especially the faithful Edain who had fought alongside the Vala, were gifted a star-shaped island called Numenor, set apart from Middle-earth. A paradise, a reward, and one that came with its own doom. Because not all evil had been vanquished. Sauron had been Morgoth's lieutenant, a Maya once gifted in craft and order. Where Morgoth ruled with terror, Sauron persuaded. Where Morgoth smashed things, Sauron reorganized them, then turned them evil after filing the proper paperwork. During the War of Wrath, Sauron had retreated. Some say he was afraid. Others believe he chose survival. Middle-earth historians still debate whether Sauron ever truly repented, or merely waited for his own time to rise. And rise he would, but Morgoth's influence never fully faded. His malice lingered like radiation, mutating hearts, darkening forests, tempting kings. Even long after his exile, his whisper could still be heard by those foolish enough to listen. The shadow had fallen, and while it had lifted in the light of divine wrath, it would return in subtler forms, slower and more insidious. The Second Age was dawning, and with it, the foundations for a new Dark Lord. Morgoth's banishment, Sauron's rise. Morgoth is cast into the void, but his legacy curdles the future. Enter Sauron, the apprentice who will finish what his master began. With Morgoth gone, it might have felt like Middle-earth could finally breathe. Birds still sang in the trees, rivers still flowed toward the sea, and for a time, the survivors of the First Age tried to believe in peace. But peace in Middle-earth is like a tavern drink in Bree. temporarily satisfying, slightly overpriced, and always followed by trouble. Let's not forget, the ashes of war had barely cooled when Sauron stepped from the shadows. Morgoth's most capable servant had evaded the wrath of the Valar by doing something Morgoth never could, apologizing. Yes, Sauron briefly tried a redemption arc. He even went full hermit mode in Middle-earth for a while, probably tending a dark garden and petting his wolves. But power, like a cursed ring, has a way of calling back its bearers. Sauron watched as the Númenóreans rose, those men who had fought against Morgoth and were now rewarded with the island paradise of Númenor. They built ships, cities of gleaming white stone, and towers that touched the clouds. But with greatness came pride. And pride, Morgoth would have told you if he weren't sealed in cosmic jail, is the perfect soil for corruption. Sauron began weaving new schemes. He moved among elves, men, and dwarves under many names, most famously as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. His voice was honeyed, his counsel wise. He helped the elves of a region forge powerful rings, tools of preservation and order. But secretly he made one more ring, a master ring, a ring to rule them all. Yes, that ring. The One Ring became the vessel for Sauron's spirit, his will, his control over the other rings. And with it, the shadow of Morgoth's legacy returned. Not in a storm of fire, but in whispers, bargains, and traps that took centuries to spring. Two major events from the later tales, both rooted in this legacy, still echo with Morgoth's shadow. First, the downfall of Númenor. Sauron allowed himself to be captured by the island's proud king, Ar-Pharazôn, then promptly corrupted the entire court. He whispered that the Valar were hoarding immortality, that men should seize it, build fleets, invade the undying lands, which they did. The result? Númenor was destroyed. The entire island sank beneath the sea in a cataclysm so massive it reshaped the world's geography again. Second, the last alliance of elves and men, led by High King Gil-galad and Elendil, survivors of Númenor's ruin. This alliance marched against Sauron to reclaim peace. They besieged Barad-dûr, fought Balrogs and orcs, and eventually saw Isildur cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand, defeating him temporarily. Sound familiar? That's the flashback at the start of the Fellowship of the Ring. A tale thousands of years removed from Morgoth's fall, and yet still tangled in it. Remember how tall Gimli was? He and his people lived in Khazad-dûm, the ancient dwarven kingdom where a sleeping Balrog, one of Morgoth's original lieutenants, would someday awaken. It's a long-delayed echo of a war supposedly ended, roaring back into the world when no one expected it. And Gollum, Frodo, the Ringwraiths, all of them, living in the long shadow of a god's ambition. Morgoth may have fallen, but his malice seeded the very soil of Middle-earth. Even the Silmarils, the cursed jewels that lit the First Age, were never fully recovered. One still lies lost beneath the waves, one buried in the earth, one shining in the sky held by Erendil as a star. They are still out there, unreachable yet ever-present. Fringe lore says that at the end of all ages, in the Dajir Daggorath, the final battle, Morgoth will break the gates of the void and return, and the world will be remade. Some elves believe Fëanor himself will rise again to reclaim the Silmarils and heal what he once broke. Middle-earth historians still debate whether this prophecy was meant as literal eschatology or just Tolkien's way of saying, to be continued, maybe. Either way, it lingers, because in this world, endings are rarely the end. They are echoes. And so, as the Fourth Age rises, and the hobbits tell tales of dragons and dark lords around cozy fires, remember that their stories were born in a time of fire and gods, a time when a single being could twist creation and throw continents into the sea. Morgoth fell, but the fall never stopped falling. And now, let the echoes fade. Let the clamor of swords and the howls of dragons drift far behind you. The last embers of the War of Wrath flicker into stillness. The broken towers of Angband lie silent beneath forgotten mountains. Somewhere, far beyond time and tide, Morgoth remains sealed in the void, dormant, distant, and unreachable, for now. The world turns on. The seas sigh against reshaped shores. Trees bloom again over long-dead battlefields. Even the ruins begin to sleep. Picture the Silmarils, one glowing in the western sky, a cold star burning with ancient fire. Another, sunk beneath fathomless ocean, resting in silence. The last, cradled in stone far deeper than any dwarf would dare to dig. Their light still lingers, just as the stories do. Your breathing slows. The noise of conflict, of oaths and war and gods in ruin. It dims. Now you're back in your own time, your own space. No more Balrogs in the dark. No more dragons circling overhead. Just quiet. The world of Middle-earth has grown still once more. So close your eyes. Let the shadow pass. Let the starlight in. Rest easy, traveler. You've wandered far.